2024 really was a wild ride in Vancouver's real estate market. At the beginning of this year, so many people predicted a complete and catastrophic collapse and implosion of this market, but it never happened. In this video, we're going to dive into exactly how we got to where we are today, how the year started and where we ended up, and why haven't we seen that complete and catastrophic collapse. By the end of this video, I'm also going to get into some predictions and talk about some opportunities that I see in the market in 2025. Let's get into all of that right now. My name is Sebastian Albrecht with the Living in Vancouver, BC team. Thank you so much for joining me every single week. If you're new here, this channel is all about living in and moving to Vancouver. And we put out videos just like this one every single week about the Vancouver real estate market and what it's like to live here, what it's like to move here. And this week, it's a little bit of a retrospective about the year behind us, about 2024, as well as the year ahead of us. So it's a bit of an unusual video. I don't do a lot of videos like this talking about sort of exactly what's happening in the market at this point in time. But I do think it's a really important thing to do every once in a while to give you a snapshot, boots on the ground, understanding of what's going on in our real estate market. Because if you are thinking of moving here, this is incredibly important for you. You have to understand what our market is like and what it's doing in the coming months and perhaps in the coming year. So let's get into that right now. How did we get to where we are today? To do that, I need to go back a few years. Let's go back all the way to COVID. And when COVID began way back in 2020, it looked catastrophic. It looked like the wheels were going to come off the bus. And CMHC predicted a massive 20+% decline in real estate prices in the Vancouver market. In fact, the opposite was true. And we saw prices skyrocket over the couple of years after that, leading into 2022, where prices peaked in the spring of 2022. And it was in that year that the Bank of Canada started to ratchet up interest rates. And we had 11 consecutive interest rate hikes that really shocked the market. We had been through so much to that point, and Vancouver's real estate market really proved to be incredibly resilient, but it could not resist the downward pressure of the increasing costs that were incurred as a result of so many interest rate hikes that frankly, very few people really believed were going to happen. And even if you thought interest rates were going to increase, you didn't think they were going to increase that quickly. So by mid 2022, it was very clear that the market was in drastic decline. Demand really softened. We didn't see a big increase in supply, but what we saw was people just got scared and they changed their plans. You know, usually we are motivated by life events, whether we're getting married or divorced or having children or retiring or whatever. People move for those reasons. But from mid 2022 onwards, people really resisted. They were scared. They were worried about what was going to happen. And so the demand side of the equation really disappeared. We'd been struggling for a very long time with supply, and that continued through all of 2022. In 2023, as 2023 approached, people thought, what's going to happen here? Obviously, as these interest rates spike, prices are going to decline and supply is going to significantly increase because that's what normally happens when interest rates triple. The cost of owning real estate got very weighty for a lot of people, and that was very tough for a lot of people to manage. But what didn't happen in 2023 was that resulting spike in supply, and that confused a lot of people. We had lower demand, but we also had still very low amounts of supply right through that entire year, all through 2023 until the very end of the year, where the supply just started to increase a bit in December of 2023 in Vancouver's real estate market. All through 2023, we saw that spike in prices from 2020 to 2022. And then from 2022 to 2023, we did see a decline. But through 2023, we saw the prices actually start to increase and rebound. And we were very close in 2023 to the peak pricing that we saw in 2022. And I should say, what was happening at the beginning of 2023 was the market was returning. There was a slowly increasing amount of demand, and prices were escalating quickly until we saw two surprise interest rate hikes. I believe it was in May and June of 2023. And that put the nail in the coffin for 2023, where prices started to soften again and demand softened again. But still, that supply didn't happen. In 2024, once again, at the beginning of the year, things looked pretty good. We started to see a little more demand. We started to see perhaps the silver lining, the light at the end of the tunnel, the general wisdom that was that we were starting to be at the end of interest rate hikes, and we should be seeing interest rate declines. An odd thing happened right when we saw the first interest rate cut. I believe it was in June of 2024, maybe it was in May, but it was right then where the market started to soften and still further soften at the second interest rate decline. And so from the latter part of the spring of 2024 through to the end of the year, we really saw demand decline. What we were expecting to see in 2023, we also saw this sudden increase in supply. And so what the conventional wisdom is, when demand decreases and supply increases, you expect prices to decline. But that's not what happened in 2024. Even though we saw much lower demand than usual and much higher supply than usual, to the point in September of 2024, we had demand 25% below the 10-year average, and we had supply 40% above the 10-year average. So this massive imbalance, but still prices held very firm, to the point at the end of the year, we're within 1 to 2% in almost every market and almost every housing type throughout Metro Vancouver of peak pricing in 2022. And that is pretty shocking. So that is where we are at today. That is where our market is at. And just in the last couple months, what we've seen is a return of demand, and demand has increased substantially to the point where in October of 2024, we were just 3% below the 10-year average. Now we've returned in November to about 9% below the 10-year average, but that's well off the lows that we saw in the 20 to 30% range below the 10-year average through a lot of the year, through a lot of 2024. So in my mind, what we are seeing, what I am starting to see, is a resurgence of our market. But I'm going to talk about that a little more coming up. So I did promise to talk about why we haven't seen our market collapse. And I think there's a few reasons for it. In fact, I think there'd be about 4 reasons that I would put out there to you as logical reasons why we're not seeing a collapse in our market. For one, I want to point out that Vancouver's market is very small. We are one of the most desirable cities in one of the most desirable countries in the world. We've seen a massive amount of immigration in recent years. And even without that immigration, Vancouver is a city that draws people from around the country. Not everybody loves it. I don't want to pretend that Vancouver is for everyone, but those that want to live in Vancouver will do what they can to get here and will pay a premium to live here. And I can attest to that myself personally. My family did that. I have chosen to be here, and I'm surrounded with people who choose that option every single day. And we are all making a certain degree of sacrifice to be here. And furthermore, I think it's important to note just how small geographically the city of Vancouver is. As high as the demand is, it's just 110 square kilometers. And so it doesn't take a lot of demand to take up all of that supply. And so it's not an area like Regina or even Toronto where you can just kind of keep building out further and further. Vancouver is a very defined geographic space. We are surrounded by rivers and ocean, the US border to the south, and the mountains to the north. And so being so desirable, having such a small landmass, being already built out for the last 40, 50 odd years, the city of Vancouver specifically, there's just nowhere to go. So our market can remain incredibly robust. There isn't a lot of supply to come onto the market. There isn't an unending amount of subdivisions that can be built or land that can be developed. And if you want to develop land, you have to pay a premium for that land. You have to buy single family residential lots in order to build a high density. And the high density is allowed to be built in the most expensive areas. So I think that's a big reason why we're seeing such a robust market. Furthermore, there's a lot of equity in our market. This is a market that has seen significant amounts of price appreciation in the last 50 years. And there's a lot of homeowners that are sitting on massive amounts of equity. They do not need to sell. We are not in a market where prices went from 220,000 to 240,000 in the last 20 years, where people are much more on the knife edge of profitability. And if things go sideways, they have to get out at any cost. That is definitely not the case these days in the city of Vancouver. There are so many homeowners who are sitting on massive amounts of equity, and they have seen such a positive result of owning real estate. They don't want to get out. They want to stay sitting on that asset, and they believe in the future of that asset because they've seen how it's performed in the past. Of course, we all know past performance doesn't guarantee future performance unless it becomes becomes sort of self-fulfilling. If everybody is holding on to their real estate and doesn't want to sell, well, then of course it can't collapse because nobody is panicking to get out of the market at all. Now, another big reason I think that we have that our market isn't collapsing is that Vancouver is very much a sort of self-selecting location. You all understand just how expensive Vancouver's real estate market is. I talk about it all the time, and you can see real estate videos all about just how expensive Vancouver is on YouTube and read all about it in newspapers. So it's no secret, right? And if you're moving to Vancouver, you're doing so with the means to live here. You are not broke. You are coming here with a good job or a significant amount of equity, understanding the expenses that you're going to incur. And so you are likely in a position to be able to withstand sort of the positive and the negative, the ups and the downs of a market. And what we've been seeing in the last couple of years, in my point of view, is an incredible robustness in our market for these reasons. There is no doubt that we are in a market that is reluctant to go downwards. We just haven't in the last few years, despite all expectations. And now, as I'm going to talk about in a moment, my belief is we are turning the corner to a point where we are likely to start to see some more significant price appreciation. We've been moving in a sideways pattern that is pretty unusual for Vancouver's real estate. If you look at the history of prices in Vancouver's real estate market over the last 50 years, there's very few periods where we've gone this long in a sideways pattern. So I want to talk a little bit about where I think things are going, some opportunities and predictions for 2025. Before I get into that, I just want to say many people assume because I'm a realtor that I want the market to go crazy. I don't. I quite honestly do not enjoy the way that our market has typically been over the last 20, 25 years or so. It is very difficult to do my job when the market goes nuts, and especially representing buyers. And so much of my business is representing buyers. And even if I'm helping somebody sell a home, they're likely gonna also try and buy a home. So in my view, actually sort of this period we've been in for the last couple of years is an ideal market for me personally, because neither buying or selling is incredibly easy. They both have their challenges. When the market returns to the normal status that we've had for the last 20 or 25 years, it becomes really, really challenging to work with buyers. And I've been through that for so much of my 18-year career, helping hundreds of people move homes, whether they're buying or selling. I've been in those markets with clients, and it's incredibly frustrating. You know, I think my record is writing 13 offers for a single client. That would have been back in, I think it was 2013. And incidentally, that was coming out of a very challenging market at the end of 2012, where the market just quickly changed at the beginning of 2013. And I do think that's a really important thing to understand about our market and my experience of our market. We don't only go up in a straight upward trajectory, right? My view is over the long term, I do believe that Vancouver's real estate market, for the reasons that I talked about why it's why we've been so robust with pricing and why we haven't seen a collapse, is also why I believe prices will continue to increase. But there are periods where things soften up a little bit. And I do think that's essentially the period that we've just gone through. And our market has been able to digest those changes. All of the government interventions, the feds, the province, and the local municipalities have all been involved in our market in one way or another, trying to address the housing issue, trying to address prices. And they have done so with varying degrees of success. I think part of the issue for me is they didn't do so in collaboration with one another. I don't think anyone really understood what the repercussions of all these changes are. And I do worry about some of the limitations of the rights of homeowners. But I also understand that changes had to happen. And there were, many issues with the real estate market from all sides. And some of those have been corrected. I think we've overshot in some other ways. But in 2025, there are a few things that I think are going to happen. And number one is I think we're going to get back to a normal level of our market. And by normal, I mean sort of the crazy periods that we go through where it's very challenging to buy and where it becomes a seller's market. And I think predominantly this is going to be in the city of Vancouver. Vancouver, and I think this is going to be less so the case the further out you go in the suburbs. I think we're going to go back to that where we were before COVID, where the city of Vancouver really drives the rest of the market. We went through this strange period where it flipped, and the only other time that this really happened was in the Spanish flu period in the early 1900s, where, that living in the city core wasn't all that desirable. People wanted to move into the hinterland, and understandably, when we were going through something like COVID, people didn't want to be close together, and the luster of living in the city kind of lost its sheen. And I think that sheen is going to return. So I've been saying this though for the last couple of years because, as we've seen COVID in the rearview mirror, at least to the extreme concerns that we had about COVID, I think it's not going anywhere. We all understand now better how to live with it. And so I've been predicting this return to the downtown, but it really has been a little bit flabbergasting to me that the downtown core has really flatlined and seen a bit of a decline. And I do think there's a couple reasons. One is that COVID effect. I think there's also been a flood of investors that have chosen to sell. They built up a lot of equity. I think some of the changes that were put in place, some of the, for instance, Airbnb regulations or the capital gains tax changes that the federal government put in place sort of motivated a lot of investors just to feel like, well, maybe this isn't a time where I want to be an investor anymore. I'm going to cash in my chips. So I think we saw more supply come on the market, and at a point where there was rather limited demand. I believe that there's an incredible opportunity specifically in downtown Vancouver right now. The other odd thing that I think happened was that we saw a lot of development of other downtown cores outside of downtown Vancouver. So if you wanted an urban lifestyle, it didn't need to be downtown Vancouver anymore. It could be Metrotown, it could be Brentwood, it could be Coquitlam Center, it could be Burquitlam, it could be Surrey City Center, it could be all of these places, or New West for that matter. All of these areas are building massive amounts of high density and are solid alternatives to living downtown in downtown Vancouver. So if you're looking for a brand new condo, maybe you saw an opportunity in some of those other areas in the last few years. I think that's a mistake. I think downtown will ultimately be the place that is the primary choice of people. And if you're a first-time buyer, if you're an investor, if you want to rent out your place down the road, where the highest demand is going to be in the downtown core. And by downtown, I'm talking about the downtown peninsula. That includes the West End, it includes Cole Harbour, it includes downtown itself, as well as Yaletown. And that whole cluster, I think, is an area that is going to see a resurgence. I think the nadir of that market is behind us. I think that it's going to return in favor. I think it's going to drive our market for 2025 and beyond. And that's an opportunity I would not miss. And another little bonus point aside from the downtown core, the other area that I really think is an opportunity is Strathcona. That is a market that was incredibly hard hit by COVID. There's that connection to the downtown east side. People on the downtown east side were really heavily impacted, I think more so than any part of our population. And Strathcona became a place that many people didn't feel comfortable living in. And there was a real push out of Strathcona, and nobody filled that gap. So still today, Strathcona is a market that I struggle to find buyers for. But its proximity to downtown is amazing. Prices are lower than they've been for years in Strathcona. And most of all, I think what's going to drive growth in Strathcona, the reason that I think it's an incredible opportunity for 2025 is the building the new St. Paul's Hospital. Moving from the West End to Strathcona is going to have a massive amount of impact on that community, and a very positive one. And so if you're looking for an opportunity in our market, I think that is a place to consider, whether you're looking for a condo, an investment property, or a home to live in with you and your family. As long as you're comfortable with taking on the risk that this is an area that is in transition, this is an area that should be moving up from a low point. I think there's nowhere to go really but up, but it is a risk. It may not change. And I can tell you from my own experience, I remember 25 years ago looking for my first condo. I was looking at Gastown, just on the edge of the downtown east side. And I remember the realtors telling me at the time, this place is about to gentrify. You're buying in at the ground floor and it's going nowhere but up. And of course, 25 years later, it certainly hasn't gotten any better, and let alone to the extent that I was being promised by the realtors. So not making any promises, but every indication would be that is a place where where you would be buying low and there's a potential to be able to sell high in the years to come. And one last prediction for you is that I think there's going to be a return to the single family detached house. In the last couple of years, we've really struggled in that market. There's been a lot of supply. There hasn't been a lot of demand. And a lot of that was driven by interest rates. It just became way too expensive for people to afford to buy a house. And so as a result, prices kind of languished. I mean, they didn't go anywhere, right? They haven't fallen, but as with pretty much every other type of housing, we're within 1 to 2% of peak pricing, but demand is very low. And if you look at the stats, you're going to see that the market for houses is much weaker than the market for condos and townhouses. Now, some people would say, well, that's clearly because they've just become too expensive and it's because of the high interest rates. But I think there's something we're missing there. And honestly, I believe it's land assemblies. And what we see, the reason we see these in the stats, they bake in all of the listings. And there are so many land assembly listings, and there have been for the last few years. And so it's swelling the supply and sort of misleading people in thinking that the market is weaker than it is. And I've helped a number of people buy houses in the last year, and it's a struggle to buy them at price points that people want to buy them. But even at whatever price point, it's difficult to find a nice house in the communities that people want to live in. And whether that's in Kitsilano or in Point Grey or on Main Street or Fraser or Commercial Drive, or going out to Burke Mountain or to Queen's Park in New West. These are all markets where it's going to look like the market for houses is incredibly weak, but it's impacted by these land assemblies and this flood of listings that just stick on the market. And the reason that they're not being sold is the last couple of years, it's been very, very challenging. One, for developers to even have a desire to package land and take risks. But second, even if they want to do so, one, finding funding, and then if they can find the funding, which has been incredibly difficult in the last couple of years, in the last year specifically, but then the funding is incredibly expensive. And so they're just not motivated to be taking that risk. As the market turns, as interest rates start to decline, I think that could change. And these land assemblies could once again become a more desirable thing. But I don't think that's the end game, at least in the near future, for most single family detached homeowners. I think what's also changing is the new multiplex zoning. And so we are seeing this being adopted. The province is forcing municipalities to adopt this. I know that Burnaby recently has adopted it. Vancouver is about to, and these multiplexes are being built. This is something that is very few people can afford to buy a brand new house. If a builder is building something, they are going to build what the market demands. And more of what the market demands is something that a family can live in, that's relatively new, that's low maintenance, but is relatively affordable. And I know I get into trouble on this all the time in the comments for people that aren't in our market, but there is an idea of relative affordability. And so rather than spending $3 million, $4 million on a new house, if you can buy sort of a nice little property with a ground level walk-in, a parking spot, and 3 bedrooms for $1.2 million in an area where a house would cost you $3 million or $3.5 million, well, that is going to feel like that is affordable. There's many more people that can afford a $1.2 million new home than a $3 or $3.5 million new home. So that multiplex zoning is going to start changing as it becomes increasingly adopted. And I saw this same thing happen when we added laneway houses to the mix. It took a while for the market to understand what we had and how it could be utilized. But my understanding is many homeowners are sitting on a bit of a cash cow that you can very quickly pocket by developing your own piece of property, whether it's into a single family home, into a unit of development with 3 stratified units or 6 on a 66-foot lot. You are sitting on the possibility of making anywhere from $1 million to $2 million in that transfer. And that's profit after taxes, after paying all the costs of building. And there's going to be more and more people that are starting to tune into that. And I think that there are markets where there is high demand for housing, like the city of Vancouver is an example, high demand for affordable housing like the city of Vancouver, where I think that's an incredible opportunity. And then there's areas just outside of Vancouver where we have larger lots where the opportunity is to build bigger and more of these units, right? So these larger 66-foot wide plus lots, areas like Burnaby as an example, that's right next to Vancouver. That's an area I think that single family residential is also really going to take off. So 2025, I think, is going to be the year of a return of demand, a return to sort of the quote unquote normal market where there's a lot of demand, it's going to be very challenging to buy. The opportunity for you as a buyer is going to be at the beginning of the year. I think it's also going to be the year of downtown Vancouver. That's going to return to form. There's going to be a resurgence of the desirability of downtown. And I also think the desirability of single family detached and sort of price increases in that market, we're going to see that return in 2025 as well. Of course, I am a real estate agent and I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. 2025, I think, is going to be my 19th year. I might be wrong. Maybe it's my 18th year. It's somewhere around there. I'm so old, I'm starting to lose count. But I have helped 500 families move to Vancouver, find the right home, and I can help you and your family as well. If you're thinking of moving here, you want to talk to a realtor who can really pinpoint the right area, the right community, and the right home. Well, I'm the realtor you're going to want to talk to. My contact information is right there on the screen, and you can reach out whenever you are ready to do so. If you're not quite ready to do so right now, no problem. I have dozens and dozens of videos just for you. In fact, I'm close to 100 videos now, I believe. And these videos are all about moving to and living in Vancouver. You're going to find whatever topic you're looking for, you're going to find the answer in these videos. And that's why I'm doing it. I want these videos to give you the information that you're looking for when you're moving to Vancouver. I really do hope you make use of that. And if you're looking for help to buy a place, be sure to reach out. In the meantime, I really do appreciate you sticking with this video all the way to the end. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this one, because I do put them out every single week, and hit the like button so other people like you can find this video as well. And if you're looking for one more video, you want to spend a little more time with me, I really think you're going to want to check out this video that I just did. It's a little more lighthearted than this video, a little more fun. I'm exploring the hood maps of Vancouver to give you an idea of what locals think of Vancouver. So check out that video and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.